So over the last 5 days, Ukraine has seen the largest Russian bombing runs of the entire war, with over 500 drones and missiles launched at Kiev, Kharkiv, Odessa, Lviv, and basically every other major city across the country. It has killed dozens of people, injured hundreds of others, struck malls, hospitals, residential apartment blocks, rehabilitation centers, kindergartens, shops, commercial district. It's hit all sorts of things, mostly civilian. But the Russian media reaction to this is not that different from the past, but it also shows that as the Russian air war intensifies, the Russian government is going to be paying very little mind to civilians who get killed along the way. Let's play this. This is from December 29th. So this is the start of the massive aerial bombardment. This is the day when the Russians fired about 153 to, I think it was 153 or 158 drones, rockets, Kinzels, S-300s, and other types at Ukrainian cities. This was Russian state TV when the news of those attacks were coming in. This is the last broadcast of this year for the program Gazprom on DylanBurnsLIVE, the main patriotic TV channel in the country. Subscribe to us, friends. We sent the coming New Year's greeting to the village with a volume of flatulence. The village is a reference to Ukraine, by the way. It's a way of kind of like portraying them as backwards. They may soon become the main exporter of gas. There is so much crying. Whoa. Most importantly, it's all done in Russian. I'm just amazed by that. Of course, when things are flying and landing on you, you'll be yelling mama in your native language. You won't recall the rules of the Ukrainian language. I'm amazed by something else. Why are you all screaming in Russian on Telegram? Aren't you lice subjected to official language laws? You walk around in embroidered shirts with a trident, hollering the Ukrainian national anthem like crazy. But as soon as something happens, you speak the Russian language without any accent. Yes, I understand that it's scary. Also, can I just quickly throw out there, to me, this proves nothing. There is like videos of people in eastern Ukraine, the regions of Russia, that Russia has occupied and said they're there to, liberate. There's videos from unoccupied parts of eastern Ukraine as well, and bombs going off, people getting hurt, people dying, people screaming. And his reaction to all this death, all this destruction isn't, oh my God, the horror. It's, hello, look at the fatulence over there. Look at everybody crying, wow, wow, wow. You notice that when everybody's dying, they're screaming in the Russian tongue, our tongue? I thought you guys were Ukrainians. Now, he's just being like a sassy bastard, right? And I think he knows it. But just in case any of you thought that was even slightly convincing, if you go to a country and have them all learn your language, that does not mean they love you or want you there when you eventually leave and they still speak your language. This has happened in many parts of Africa. There are many countries in Africa that hate the French, despise the French. You go on the street, what's the language you hear? French. Why do they hate the French? Because they have a long history of colonialism with the French. And so many of them have lost the ability to speak their original mother tongue that their ancestors spoke. Or that other people more deep in the country that were less tied with that cultural language enforcement or cultural language laws or whatever it might be, less affected by it. For example, in Western Ukraine and in a lot of the more rural communities of Ukraine, Ukrainian is more spoken. This also led to, during the Soviet Union and before the Soviet Union, a kind of view of the Ukrainian language as a kind of hick, backwater, redneck language, which was used to, quite frankly, discriminate against Ukrainians and treat them quite negatively. But the reason why Ukrainians speak Russian when they're getting bombed is the same reason that the Irish speak English when they were fighting during the Troubles. And they were yelling in English, saying, up the raw. They didn't say up the raw in Irish. Why didn't they? Because there's a history of colonialism there. You didn't prove anything. All you proved is that the Russian language, through any number of either cultural diffusion and sometimes forced cultural assimilation, was able to spread its language into Ukraine.
Я понимаю, что
I understand you didn't expect this many all at once.
Не ожидали. Кто еще вас сказал?
Who else will take care of you, goats?
Это удел москаля.
This is a lot of Muscovite.
Заботиться о вас,
to take care of you, bastards.
Потому что
because you aren't capable of it on your own.
Не способны. Сами вы можете.
On your own, you can't just lift up your head and howl. You can just lift up your head and howl. Like a wolf to the moon.
Абсолютно 100%.
Using 100% of Russian curse words. Your fate is merciless. Could you imagine? We're like bombing Canada, and I'm like, oh, Canada's a real other country? Yeah, what language are you speaking right now when you're screaming when we bomb and kill you? It's psychotic, man. This is psychopathic.
Это правда.
It's true.
Судьба действительно
Fate truly is merciless towards you.
А знаете почему?
Do you know why?
Потому что удача любит подготовленных.
Fate loves those who are prepared and are not imbeciles.
Но если вы уже
if you're already in the position of being secondary, man, then fate must have really fucking hated the. I mean, 3-day operation going on 2 years. How are those convoys getting raided? Getting knocked out by Bayraktar drones when the Russians should have been able to control that airspace with their air force. I mean, you guys certainly weren't prepared. All I'm saying is this feels like a what is it? A rocks and glass house situation.
Ну так
get used to loving pain.
Это полезный навык.
It is a useful ability.
Жизнь такая.
This is what life is like.
Что хотеть?
What did you want? Life is full of negativity.
Полна негатива. Собственно, вы
you choose this path, you could have been like people. But this is exactly what you wanted. Who else is at fault for this but yourselves? I would say the people who did the shooting are at fault. Also, you should pray.
Вы помолитесь. But
in a correct church, not in a Ukrainian Orthodox one, pray for the health of the president of Russia, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Because Vladimir is very humane. You can't begin to imagine what would happen. If we had another president who is not a humanitarian. How many and how often they would fly at your clueless heads. Okay, so, you know, a lot of this is just kind of like rumbling, like ramblings of the glory of Russia and oh, if you speak Russian, you need to be part of Russia. A lot, Putin's great, pray for Putin. A lot of this is just low bar, just gloating and just this dude dragging his knuckles to the ground and acting like a dumb monkey, right? Whatever. What I'm interested in here is in his mind, Putin's a humanitarian. On its face, ridiculous, considering the suppression of the press, the suppression of sexual minorities, suppression of national minorities, the death pits that have been uncovered in liberated territory, the use of torture, like the 21 Roses strategy, which you can look up yourself, or all of the people that were mistreated in Russian captivity, with the UN reporting that 91% of people who were detained by the Russians in Russian captivity were either tortured, raped, sexually abused, or mistreated. 91%. 91%. He's not a humanitarian. But what I'm interested in here is he believes he's humanitarian because when you look at Ukrainian cities and they're getting bombed by the Russians, the cities aren't literally flattened like Kiev. And in his mind, the reason that isn't the case is because they could fire more rockets, as he said, but they don't because Putin is so nice. It's bullshit. The Russians have been saving up rockets and drones and Kinzhal missiles, S-300s for months and months and months and months and months for the winter, to wait for the peak of winter to unleash this barrage. So when they target heating, so when they target electricity and they target services, it's going to be at a time where a lack of heat and a lack of electricity is going to be particularly harmful to civilians. This is an attempt to break the will of the Ukrainian people, which, I mean, from the way he's talking, he is also trying to enable, speaking down to them. Your culture's fake. You're all speaking Russian anyway. Pray for our leader that bombs you, etc., etc. The reason why that Kiev has not been flattened, even though the Russians were perfectly happy flattening Grozny, and it was declared the most destroyed city in the world by the UN after the Russian bombardment. The same reason why the Russians are comfortable flattening cities in Syria, bombing hospitals, and using UN data to bomb hospitals. The difference here is that the Russians don't have complete air superiority in Ukraine. There are air defense systems that will shoot down their rockets, drones, and planes. And in fact, they lost a bunch of planes just a few weeks ago. Modern planes, Su-30s, and like modern good planes, $50 million shot out of the air in a single day due to an ambush with anti-air equipment by the Ukrainian armed forces. They lost 3 planes in a single day. And after that, air attacks on the crossing of the Dnieper River, where the Ukrainians have moved troops across to try to do a crossing across the Dnieper, and in other areas of the country, air attacks decreased because they were fearful of losing more planes. The reason why the Russians haven't flattened every city in Ukraine is because the Russians can't flatten every city in Ukraine. Why would they have waited for months and months and months to save up all this equipment to fire it all at Ukraine during the winter if they had enough rockets to fire at the Ukrainians consistently? Why would they stop? Because they're just nice people? Get the fuck out of here. Come on. They had to save up their rockets and drones because they didn't have enough rockets and drones to bombard Ukraine in this type of heavy way that they're doing now. So they waited until they could. And now they can because they've saved up enough. And now they're letting it loose.
Сколько бы и как часто
how many and how often would fly at your clueless heads? What is the real attitude towards you?
Вы даже себе этого
You
не
cannot even imagine this.
Сначала вас
At
жалели.
first, you were pitied.
Потом смотрели с
Then you were looked
недоумением.
at with disbelief.
Потом с
Then
полупрезрением.
with half disdain.
Потом с полным
Then with total
презрением.
disdain.
А сейчас не смотрят
Now
вообще.
you're not considered at all.
В принципе.
As a matter of principle.
Потому что человек
Because your humanity is gone.
утрачен.
Could you imagine this shit playing on NPR when we're talking about Iraqis? We used to look on the Iraqis with pities, but their humanity is gone. We cannot consider them. This is state media. This is connected to Solenev, the most popular propagandist in all of Russia, talking about their humanity is gone. And I like the arc here that he's talking about, because the arc does come with some semi-honesty here, because at first you were pitied. There was a real narrative at the very beginning of the war that the government was pushing, was that, hey, you go in, they're all being held hostage by the Nazis, and so we just kick in the door into Ukraine and the whole rotten edifice will come crashing down. That didn't happen. In fact, the people that they thought were going to run to them with open arms were shooting at them and firing Molotov cocktails at them, throwing it at them, grenades, and fighting tooth and nail. And so then they were reacted to with disbelief, like, how dare you reject the mighty Russia, the most powerful Russia? Russia has a right to empire. Russia has a right to dominate you, to take you, to kill you if it wants to. How dare, and we are giving you the opportunity to give up and you won't. And so he moves over to disdain, because that disbelief of being rejected and being thrown from the gates of Kiev turned into half disdain, then total disdain as they found more failures, not only in Kiev, but in Kharkiv and Mykolaiv and Kherson, and now they don't care anymore. War of liberation? Yeah, right. Kill, kill, kill. That's how it sounds when he says we don't consider you anymore. It's like, civilians die, civilians don't die. I do have to say, by international standards, the Russian military is required to consider civilian casualties, and the civilians, they said they're coming to liberate, by the way, when doing these strikes. Just throwing that out there. This is Russian state media, Russian government propaganda being put out, saying that they don't even consider the civilians anymore.
Или с недоумением. Не смотрят вообще никак.
Now you're not considered at all.
В принципе.
As a matter of principle.
Потому что человеческое.
Because your humanity is gone. I mean, I'm going to be blunt. Genocidal rhetoric. When you dehumanize your opponents, the civilians of another country like that, and a nation you're invading and making death pits in, yeah, that right there is genocidal rhetoric. In front of you, there are millions of people.
Миллион людей, миллионы даже,
who cannot comprehend the changed reality.
Не поменявшиеся реалии. Ничего.
Or anything at all. The latest polls show that 81% of the villagers, again, they're the backwoods village people. They're not Ukrainians. They're not their own thing. Just a bunch of ignorant hicks. Just that's the narrative. Has to continuously push it. The latest polls show that the majority of them trust their government. Listen, what do you call this?
Ну, это как?
This is the problem, is when they invaded, the original narrative was that the Ukrainians don't love the regime. They're being held captive by the regime, so you just got to kick it in. And so when the reality of the world, which is that Ukrainians might not like their government all that much, but they hate the Russian government a million times more and don't want them to take over the country. When that reality, that wall of reality and the propaganda hit the wall, smashed into a million pieces, they didn't know how to process it. When that was their personal narrative. And so now they have this disdain, this misplaced disdain based on the idea like we came to like love you and bring you in with our guns and violence, but now you rejected us. So I can't believe how ridiculous you guys are for rejecting us. So now we just have to abuse you and we have to bomb you because our invasion failed. Come on, man. Like what? Yeah, you go in, you bomb the country to high hell. Are you really surprised that they don't like you that much?
What? Это 81%.
This is 81% of whom? How do you like your new reality? Is it all good?
Как? В новых реалиях все хорошо?
Again, he's just mocking civilians as they get bombed and killed in Russian airstrikes. Do you think if this type of elite class could actually get their hands on Kiev, that it would all just be smiling faces and bygones be bygones? They say if you make a New Year's wish,
что не пожелается, все всегда произойдет.
Everything always comes true. All of it comes to be. Every year I wish for one thing.
Построиться в колонну.
Lines up in columns or files of 8 or 88.
88, мне наплевать.
I couldn't care less.
Отправиться.
All of you march together
на поиск
in search of what was beaten out of your heads on Maidan.
Нет, не мозга.
No, not brains. You've been born without them. The Ukrainians were born without brains. Again, I wonder why the Ukrainians don't want these guys controlling. I wonder if it's going to be a loving occupation. Searching for elements of self-preservation. The owners will return and restore the subways.
Хозяева вернутся, метро восстановят. Хозяева много чего.
The owners will do all sorts of things.
Хозяева не смогут сделать.
There is only one thing the owners can't do.
Хозяева не смогут
The owners can't turn you into people.
сделать вас людьми. Вот это нереально.
This is impossible.
Потому что
This is all one segment, by again, this is all like one
вы не люди.
7-minute segment. And it's just, you're not people, you're not humans, you're lice. Nobody can make you into human beings. You have no humanity. We don't even consider you. We have open, total disdain for you. This is your existence now. It's this terror. Wow, you're crying because you're being bombed. Again, the narrative is that the Russians are invading to liberate the Ukrainians who desperately want to break away to freedom. That was the original the narrative of the invasion. Could you see why a Ukrainian who sees somebody who thinks this about their country might not want those people in question to control their country or the future of their country or the future of them and their families?
Люди.
Nowadays, you are not people. That was the first one. Let's move on to the second one. This one has a different Russian propagandist on state TV saying that more Ukrainians need to get better, need to get killed, and the more that die, the better the situation will be. There was a new publication in The Economist. Zelensky's words don't even sound like him. What is this, a hardening of rhetoric? Why is this necessary? For context, Russia and the CCP flag. For context, Zelensky gave an interview to The Economist recently where he's pretty hardline, like, we need to fight for freedom, we need everything that he's already said, he just said it again. And he just said it, like, I think more aggressively. But it was all the same usual, like, we will continue to fight for freedom, etc., etc. The Russians, if you bring them to the negotiating table, I think the one thing they changed, he said that Putin behaves like an animal, that he's looking for blood. How do you read what is happening? Listen, we also don't get upset about their dead. We dryly count them. 100K, 30K, 500,000. There's not 500,000 Ukrainian dead. That's just, it's not even, it's not, I mean, even the 300K is also just not a plausible number, but 500,000 is just in fairyland. There are discussions on this topic. I haven't encountered any distress about it. Quite the contrary. The more we kill, the closer it is to the end of the war. This kind of hardening is normal during war. There is also internal hardening of society. On one hand, there is consolidation. On the other hand, there is a rejection of all who disagree. Because war is not a natural state of society. Actions that are punishable in normal times are rewarded during war. In normal times, you get punished for killing a person. During war, you get rewarded for it. You would be punished for destroying a house. During war, you get rewarded for it. Society is in a state of cognitive dissonance. That's why the feeling that your war is just is very important. If you lack the feeling that your war is just, then the hatred is being pumped up even more. Wow, you don't say, huh? We wage war not because we're good, but because they are bad. Wow, beautiful. In Ukraine, there is no feeling that their war is just. I don't know if this guy's ever been to Ukraine, ever stepped foot in Ukraine, ever spoke to, saw, or been in the general vicinity of a Ukrainian, but man, that's not the vibe I got from any of my conversations with anyone in the country. During war, there is a consolidation of society, and consolidation on the basis of rejection of others. During this time, additional pumping up is happening. The closer is the feeling of defeat. If there is no feeling that your cause is just, the more the hatred is pumped up. Remember the last days of the Reich. Wow, it's crazy that it's the last days of the Reich and the front line has changed basically, well, not really at all in the last year. I remember in 1944, the front line changing quite significantly, but whatever.